This is I Don't Speak German. I'm Jack Graham, he, him, and in this podcast I talk to my friend Daniel Harper, also he, him, who spent years tracking the far right in their safe spaces. In this show we talk about them and about the wider reactionary forces feeding them and feeding off them. Be warned, this is difficult subject matter. Content warnings always apply.
Hello and welcome to I Don't Speak German bonus episode 22. I can never remember the exact number, but I looked up the last one was 21, so this one should be 22. We did miss October. Jack is still having some issues with his health, and hopefully that's going to be solved pretty soon. But so he's not going to be joining us today, although this may you may be listening to it on his feed because I'm going to give him the file. Instead, I am joined by a new voice of the pod, someone that I've been kind of chatting with behind the scenes for a little while now. And this is Eric, and he runs a Substack built on sort of skepticism towards ESG efforts in the corporate world, and is something of a self-taught expert on Elon Musk. So since Elon just bought Twitter, finally, and is running that to the ground, we thought we would kind of discuss Elon Musk a little bit. So Eric, please say hello.
Hi. Yeah. So thanks for having me on. I am sadly a kind of long time Elon Musk expert, for better or for worse. And so I run a publication called ESG Hound, where I look at finance and corporate governance and greenwashing topics from a mostly left liberal standpoint. But I try to be realistic about kind of this hot topic that everyone's talking about. In particular, I got decent traction last year. Elon Musk's rocket company SpaceX was expanding their operations in South Texas, which the operation down there is situated in basically surrounded by wildlife preserve, and they were expanding to basically do a lot more explosions and launches, and they were actually going to put in a natural gas plant, a power plant, and like LNG facilities in there. They kind of tried to sneak it past government regulators, and I wrote a bunch about it, and they ended up canceling some of the natural gas stuff. They ultimately got approval, probably not in compliance with the law. And so basically I've kind of had this Elon Musk critical voice on Twitter that's kind of specific to SpaceX. And there's been a long time kind of Twitter skepticism community, but it's mostly centered around kind of his Tesla, his car company. But yeah, I mean, Elon's in the news again about Twitter, and I figured, Daniel and I could talk about kind of all those intersecting different topics, and some of them that really do like involve like this really kind of scary right-wing, ethno-nationalism that's been going on behind the scenes for years.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, the first time I really paid much attention at all to Elon Musk, like as a cultural figure in terms of his in terms of his ability to actually do the things he says he's going to do, was the "Do Not Eat" video on the Loop. I don't know if you've seen that, but he has gone on to. He's part of the Well, There's Your Problem podcast. He's kind of the lead guy there, and I mean, it's just once you start looking at the math behind this stuff, it's like not even. Because his point is always like it's not like the engineering is like inherently flawed necessarily, although in some cases it is, as much as there are like downstream social effects,
Right.
Like it's not that you can't drive a car in a tunnel, it's that you still need just as much of an interchange as you would if you were building on surface roads. And the other like kind of technical challenges, and that's the sort of thing that like the Musk fanboys just never seem to like be able to get through their heads, is that there's more than just this sort of like techno magic stuff, and that you can't just innovate your way out of some of these problems. And I find that this, like, as someone who has a background in STEM and who has like spent a lot of time with like engineers and, researchers of various kinds, I mean, I do find this sort of, this kind of tech genius like inability to see kind of social reality is something that Elon Musk is just that times a billion. Basically, it's like
Right.
what if one of those guys just got to play with $244 billion and make fun racing cars? And obviously that intersects with a lot of like far right personalities, both in sort of the Silicon Valley, like, the kind of live, work, die, kind of idea of, there's just this kind of right wing ideology that just goes along with this, but also like very explicitly in some cases. And so I'm wondering if you have any examples of something that's kind of pretty explicit Elon Musk, connections, other than that, they both worked at PayPal. Well, he worked at PayPal with Peter Thiel back in the day.
Right.
Obviously, that's a connection, but I'm wondering, what else kind of comes to your mind immediately in terms of Musk's.
There's a bunch of it, and I think if you look back at this like techno fetishism, there's this idea that's been going around for a while that like, and you see it now, like especially cropping up with Twitter, that like Twitter is being run by like commies because like the employees there are well educated, like young white guys who tend to be more like socially liberal, and so there's this idea that it's like the communists are running it. And I think that's been kind of like the brilliance of Thiel, like the kind of that Thiel ideology that's been behind the scenes. And if you go back and you look at kind of the dialogue back in like 2015, like these kind of like libertarian types were, all about like, kind of just like being accepting of homosexuality, but like, free markets. And then there was a lot of talk about stuff like, I don't know if you remember this. There was a bunch of talk about like universal basic income. And so Musk was one of those guys that was like universal basic income. And behind the scenes, Thiel was kind of saying stuff like this. And it's really like in the last couple of years, it's moved to this like almost like neo like feudalism. Like it's like Peter Thiel's like a royalist, and you've seen Musk kind of, and I don't know, I don't want to say like, oh, so and so's manipulating, but you've seen basically this whole like VC set, like the PayPal mafia and all the other people associated with this crowd have kind of made this weird move to like an explicitly like authoritarian standpoint. And I will point out there was a great article on David Sachs, another member of that crew who's injected himself into the middle of this Twitter deal. Jacob Silverman wrote a really great article on this just a couple weeks ago, so I highly recommend you read that, and then
I'll get that link to you, and you can I may have already read it, but you just give it to me. I'll put it in the show notes for sure. So
yep.
I mean, what you were saying about like UBI being this kind of pushed by these libertarian types, I mean, that goes back several years. I mean, I remember seeing that even mid 2000s. Megan McArdle was kind of like making noises about that kind of UBI, and it was explicitly intended to be like the cheap version of the welfare state. Essentially, we're just going to gut the entire. So it's not like, we're going to provide services and then also provide, some money for everyone so that they can, be free of work. It was, we're just going to gut the welfare state and we're going to replace it with, a $300 check every month, and then that's going to be enough for people, which is not the case. It was always this like subterfuge. Ultimately, is this sort of almost a way to kind of get the left liberals kind of on board by making the kind of UBI noises that that people like. And I think that interestingly, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, that's something that we've been kind of talking about in this podcast. Obviously, is there is this switch right around the right around Moldbug. Curtis Yarvin, who essentially, I mean, he doesn't invent, but certainly popularizes this, essentially libertarian monarchism, in which they lose all respect for democracy. Like democracy is kind of fundamentally flawed because, we're the bright people, we're the elites, we're the smart ones who can come in and actually save all this. And I think that's very like Silicon Valley as well. It's very tech bro. It's like Elon Musk doesn't see himself as as the CEO of a great company. He sees himself as the visionary who's going to transform society around him in ways, and that no one gets to tell him no. No one gets to ask questions about him. And I think that's this feeds into that kind of VC, mythos, or the kind of the CEO of the great, Silicon Valley, company, the great startup. It feeds into that, constantly. That those ideas just kind of go hand in hand. And I think that, what Moldbug does is provide this sort of intellectual justification for it through the neo reaction movement, which then leads, it kind of feeds into what became the alt-right and what is now, what we're seeing in the streets today. I mean, it's all the same. It's the same general idea. It's just it became a little more explicitly anti-Semitic over time.
Yes. Well, I think the genius part, and it's interesting that you brought up the Hyperloop at first, is that Musk's kind of genius has been to launder himself as an engineer instead of just like a visionary. And I think that's interesting because engineering at its like fundamental level is not inventing. It is usually the application of like standards, right? So it's basically a function of like the bureaucratic state, which is what they want to dismantle. And so Musk really like laundered himself as this engineering. And I think that the Hyperloop examples, I think, was when I just like, that's what broke my brain on him years ago, because if you're looking at it like, and so I have a background in oil and gas and I work for a pipeline company. And if you look at his assumptions, he's like, okay, we're going to make a 500-mile long tube that goes across the ground, and it's going to be, so many meters in diameter. And he's doing these like cost analyses, and he doesn't ever reference like the pipeline industry. So pipeline industry has like scores of engineering volumes about like, how many welds you have to do per meter, like all these different functions. And instead he's like, well, this is the price of, milled steel. And he's like, I'm just going to assume it's going to be, however many million kilograms. And he's like, I'm just going to add like some bullshit number for like how much it's going to cost to weld it. Whereas like the pipeline industry has these standards in place, and then kind of cutting over to that where that's like, he's like laundering his credibility through engineering, which is like, that's not how engineers do things. Like they'll look at codes and standards. They basically it's all iterative on top of what other people have done. But if you look at like the way it's applied, right? And so this is kind of the other examples. If you're going to have this, vacuum tube super speed train, the curvature of the tube has to be basically minimal. And so you're talking about through California, you have to basically, you're talking about like right of ways and land rights. Like in order to make that happen, you have to like gut the entire like regulatory state that revolves around like, right of ways and land use. You have to say, nope, my project is going to get this exact path, and it doesn't matter whose land it cuts through, because this is what I want to do. And so that for me like really cuts into like what's interested me the most, besides this kind of like ideological stuff, is like his disdain for like regulations is just profound. It's like the Koch brothers times a million. And I don't think a lot of people have really paid attention to that. And it's stunning to me, really.
Well, and you sort of like, you don't have to hand it to the Koch brothers, but the Koch brothers have like an ideological goal, and they have like, they're trying to make money. They're trying to kill the regulatory state so that they can make money through their investments. Or when the CEO of Chevron wants to deny climate change and wants to get rid of all the environmental regulations, that comes at like, that's pure greed capitalist impulse, right? With Elon, he really does strike me as just this like this overgrown child,
right?
Who just wants to do it. And I'm a train guy. I don't know if that kind of comes across how much, but I'm a casual train guy, and like I really want like California high-speed rail. And Elon just personally killed high-speed rail in California by promising all these like legislators, oh no, we're just going to build the Hyperloop, and that's going to be the future, and that's going to be better, and that's going to be, and it's like, it's just you're just wrecking the world for your own your own ego. You're just wrecking things that would actually make a material difference in people's lives. And you're just taking resources for yourself, and not even out of any like, not even like avarice, like it's like he's just this pure, I don't know, just like college
chaos
sophomore.
goblin.
Chaos goblin. Yeah, exactly. No, sorry, I'm not like expressing myself all that clearly here, but I think just, I
agree. And I think to the Koch brothers is a really good point. And like you said, not to give credit to them, I think if you actually follow the history of the company, is that in the 1980s, the Koch brothers, like their company had like an explicit, like they would do like a cost benefit analysis. So they would say they would take a refinery, and they actually had one of their refineries in Minnesota had a bunch of I don't remember what it was. I think it was ammonia or something, or maybe it was benzene. They basically had this like giant plume that they kept basically just poisoning. I don't remember exactly what it was. I think it was groundwater poisoning. I don't remember what the exact pollutant was. And the regulators kept basically like hitting them every year with like a, $2 or $3 million fine. And they're like, this is going to cost us $200 million to fix. And if I look at my capital table, my depreciation, like it's just cheaper to pay the fine. And so they would do that across the board until the media got wise to it, until they started getting sued, and the regulators were not just saying, we're going to fine you, we're going to shut you down. And so the Koch brothers then they basically they came up with this new mantra, which was like 110% compliance. It was like, or 1,000% compliance. I don't remember what it was. It was like 100% compliance 100% of the time. Right. And let's be honest, like that's impossible to do even for a company that wants to do the right thing. But they put a lot of efforts into like applying with the rule of the law, and they took that money, and instead of like fighting the individual, like, consent decree to like, not stop polluting the river with benzene, they tried to dismantle the state behind the scenes to try to like loosen the regulations. But when it comes to the day-to-day operations, they're like, mostly compliant, like for the above the book stuff.
I've worked in highly regulated industries. I worked in the pharmaceutical industry for a while, and it is like, you've got your set of rules that you have to abide by, at the bottom level, and it can be a firing offense to, violate some of these things, very quickly. And yet those same industries are then working at the higher level to ease those regulations. And so that's kind of the two-step that they play in these games. Whereas, Elon is just kind of openly, like during, I'm sure you have tons of examples of this, but during the beginning of lockdowns, when he's just like, well, no, we're just that Dallas facility, we're just going to be open, and I hope they come and arrest me. And it's like, right. And that's
a
very different mode, right? Yeah. Sorry.
Right. Go ahead. No, and I think that cuts to the core of like the way Musk is different. And the way I've kind of compared it is like, you see some similar, parallels to like how Amazon and Facebook does it, but they still like, what I've said is like, they're playing in like the ballpark, and they're like, they're using corked bats, right? To use a baseball analogy, they're stealing signals. They're like breaking the rules. Whereas like Musk is like playing Calvin ball in the parking lot. Like he's just like, it's a totally different game. And you see it. Like there's so many examples. I think the kind of the most horrifying issue that I think a lot of people have read, kind of the stuff that's going on in SpaceX that I've written. But I think the one example that I have that just still blows my mind is when they were starting up the mass production, and this is in California in their factory, which is really just like pretty close to like a residential area, kind of a poor residential area, that they were ramping up production at their paint shop for the Model 3 buildup. And this is when the company was in pretty serious financial straits, and they were kind of, at the risk of going bankrupt. And they had this production push that they had to like meet to investors to be like, and what happened was their paint shop was like so poorly designed, and they were running it beyond capacity, that their scrubber system, and so the scrubber is going to be something that basically pulls out like toxic particles and actually uses like a charged magnetic plate to basically remove what we call like hazardous air pollutants, these carcinogens out of the air. And it was so backed up that it was like causing fires. Like this has like been reported multiple times. Ed Niedermeyer has written a bunch about it. There's been some other articles, and they were having all these safety issues. And at some point, someone at the factory made a deliberate decision to turn off the air pollution control equipment and basically circumvent it and shoot like hazardous air pollutants that were not permitted like directly out into the atmosphere, which is in the environmental world, like 99% of problems are these like civil violations where like you messed up. It may have been to like, kind of neglect or like, poor repair or whatever. But like, this is like, when you do that, that is the time when the EPA actually has a criminal enforcement division, and they throw people in jail for that. Yeah. And so they like there's like documented evidence of them like circumventing a control device to meet a production goal, which is hugely illegal. And the EPA, like, was notified of it. They did investigations, and they ended up just doing like a minor civil penalty over it. And for me, that's like the most egregious example, because when you talk about like the failures of regulatory state is like Musk has been a genius at for some reason, not getting hit for that, because other companies I've worked for have gotten like basically debarment or, threats from the federal government. Like if you don't get your shit in line, like you're going to go to jail, including companies that have circumvented control devices, and where it's happening with him. And it's just like, no one cares. And California regulators, despite the reputation about them, they're asleep at the wheel. And so that's, for me, that's always the most telling story when it comes to like his view on like compliance.
Yeah, I mean, and you got to think that that's a partly ideological thing, in terms of that Musk has this kind of aura around him because he kind of sells himself in this very particular way, to regulators and to legislators at that matter. Like that he that a lot of that comes from that kind of golden boy kind of phenomenon that other CEOs and other companies can't match. But I mean, you also got to wonder, like, where's that? There's got to be some money changing hands, right? At some point.
Right.
Like,
right.
and it is like one of those things whenever like these right-wing chuds are like, California just over-regulating everything. And it's like, these are very like center right, like neoliberal shills at a certain point, like when Gavin Newsom is, the like standard bearer of like the California state government, this is not exactly, these are not exactly raging, Lenin and Mao are not like hiding in the bushes anywhere in California,
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a broader problem than just California. Like, I mean, every left of center, or even center candidates, like, well, no, this is communism again. One thing I forgot, I did take a note before this, that my favorite anecdote about Musk when it comes to regulatory, besides the emission one, this one is a labor issue. I don't know if you know, the Trump administration did a NLRB investigation under Musk or under Trump.
Sure.
And actually, like, they actually did a hearing under Trump against Tesla. That's how bad it was. Right. And so there was this whole back and forth in, like, I want to say like 2018, where basically union busting, like Musk was doing on Twitter, and Grimes, his partner at the time, was like helping to do union busting online, and she was like offering to mediate like union discussions, which is all very weird. Anyway, the settlement that the company came to was finalized at the beginning of 2021. And again, most of this happened under the Trump administration. And essentially, this was in March of 2021. The NLRB said, "Hey, you messed up. You have to like apologize. You have to pay $10 million, and also you have to delete tweets." Right. So that was and the most insane thing is this order was put in that Tesla signed up. They signed the letter saying, we're going to do this in 2021. The tweet that was supposed to be deleted is still up there on Twitter. Like, he still has not deleted that tweet. And like, it's there. You can see it today. And so like, it's that's not even like, you talk about like the kind of the Koch comparisons, like the Koch brothers are going to be like, oh yeah, fine, we'll delete a tweet. I mean, like, that's like, we got off easy, but like Musk is like, it's so much more than just like the money. It's like he's just, it's this like whole ego thing where it's like, he's not deleting a tweet, which is just, it's bananas to me. I don't get it.
Yeah, no, that's, I mean, it does feel like ego and, it and ego together, just climbing this ziggurat of complete nonsense. I mean, I just, it's amazing to me like how much he just loves his sycophants as well, and how much he loves being in the spotlight and going on Joe Rogan and going to these things. And I just like, I'm fascinated. I guess I think I haven't spent a lot of time thinking about Musk until I think the Twitter stuff, because I've kind of followed along. I kind of know the big picture, but I haven't, like, I don't follow like SpaceX day by day, which is why I was really excited to get you on here so we could kind of talk about some of this stuff. But I think one thing that people don't realize is that, like, he didn't found Tesla, for instance. He bought Tesla. And then, and there's a whole, I know there's a story behind that. I don't know if you've got it on hand where you could kind of talk about some of that history. I
do. And for your show notes, I'm going to recommend Edward Niedermeyer's book. He's a friend of mine, called Ludicrous. It's an excellent read for people who want to know kind of the origin story of Tesla. And So basically he was a very early financier of the company. He bought his way on with his PayPal wealth. And he was listed in news articles as like a financier, and it really got under his craw. So he ended up forcing the two founders out, and there was some lawsuit about him getting officially named as a founder, and that's like kind of an ego thing. In fairness to him, a lot of people have used that to discredit, what he's done at Tesla, but like at that point, it was like the original Roadster and then like the very early stages of what would become the Model S. And so, like, to be clear, like officially he's not a founder, but Tesla as it exists today, like it would be foolish to say that isn't 90%, 90% like as a result of his ability to raise funds and to hire engineers and to just beat them to death and underpay them until whatever. I mean, like that is like, so on the one hand, like technically he's not a founder and he's sued for it and it's fun to make fun of him for it. But like for all intents and purposes, I mean, he's, so much more important than the people that founded the company that like, for me, it doesn't.
Sure. Yeah, no, I wasn't trying to kind of, make that value judgment at all. I mean, but I do think that, I mean, it is important that, again, the golden glow off of him, seems to come from this, he sees, I don't know if you've read a lot of Robert Heinlein.
I have, yes.
You ever read The Man Who Sold the Moon? It was one of his
I have not.
Okay. Well, I believe Elon Musk sees himself as the lead character of The Man Who Sold the Moon, who is this kind of brilliant industrialist who's building rockets and who uses this like political wiles in order to like eventually send up the first rocket that lands on the moon. Like that's the story of that novel, or that novel. It's a novella, but anyway, so not important. But the like Heinleinian, sort of archetype of the brilliant whiz kid who's also the industrialist who kind of goes off and does and I think Musk sees himself very much in that light, and I think that he sells himself that way even to people who haven't like read those archetypes. And I guess where I'm going with that is that like he sort of gets along with, like, he has to frame himself as an engineer, or else people will see him as just the ruthless businessman, right? Which is what he is. And like you point out, like, yeah, he absolutely tortures his employees, who some of whom, say, oh yeah, it was the greatest working experience of my life. I got so much accomplished. Well, yeah, you also worked 90-hour weeks and, to meet impossible specifications so that like the Tesla door handles will work the way that Elon thinks they should because he saw it in a sci-fi movie once, like,
and it turns out most of the time the door handles don't actually work like they're supposed to, but that's another story.
Yeah. I love the Tesla like engineering problems. Like, oh, if the door is locked, then you just have to, open up the glove compartment. No, if the power's down, there's a special key that you have to get to. And it's like, I can't just open a latch, I can't, like these things are death traps. I would never own a Tesla. Like it's just
I mean, they're poorly assembled cars. I think yeah, I mean, like, and like, I think, and that's why I do think the founder story is like very funny because it tells a lot about his personality. But I think sometimes like a lot of like the people on the left, like you see critiques of him, people are always like, oh, he's like apartheid, which I think doesn't play a lot into his personality, but they're like, oh, well, the emerald mine thing. And like, there's some truth to that, but it's like probably like his dad was like a millionaire, but not like, not like running the country type rich like he currently is. And so I think a lot of that actually works to Musk's benefit because it kind of undermines like the way that he's actually gotten successful. I think a lot of the way he approaches things is definitely foundationally from like kind of a like his apartheid, like you have a two-tier system. I think that's how he approaches everyone he interacts with. So I think that's instructive, but I do find a lot of times like the people on the left who criticize him for the emerald mine thing, it's like, that's like an aside. Maybe you make a little joke about it, but that's, for me, that's
the
like
core of the critique at all.
Right.
And I think it often, and I think that is sort of like the Twitterification problem of the way that we talk about these things, is everything has got to be in 280 character, bites, as opposed to, something that's a little bit more long form and a little bit more, kind of gets at the subtleties a little bit more. Although, I mean, ultimately what Elon Musk really is, he's just a flashy, robber baron, effectively. I mean, he's just the exploitation of the system taken to the nth degree. I mean, who gets to do it partly because of the myth he's made around himself about it, like,
right.
yeah.
Well, no, it's just funny because even the people that critique him, like, I mean, like listening to you, and like, this is not like a knock on you. You know, your idea of him is like as this businessman, but he's kind of shitty at running businesses. If you actually look at, well, and so you look at him as being like, I think a lot of critics of Musk almost give him too much credit, where they're like, oh, well, he's like this singular evil, instead of him being a consequence of, like, the regulatory state failing, and then also this like insane concentration of wealth. So this kind of like venture capital, mode of financing, that he's been able to just sell things. He's basically like, like how Elizabeth Holmes was able to just raise this insane amount of money, that his real genius is being able to continue to fundraise in spite of business fundamentals being either horribly bad, as is the case with his Twitter deal and with SpaceX, even though those numbers are a little bit more obscure, to like things that have kind of worked out, which is like Tesla was like a terrible situation, but the Chinese, it basically in allowing him to build there with the kind of a special arrangement, have become a somewhat decently profitable enterprise. So it's just really interesting to me because I think, the businessman thing, like we tend to think about people who like min max like production and like do a really good job of managing commodities and workflows and like all these synergies with supply chains and customers. But I think really his big genius is just this force of will of getting people to work extra hard for him, and for people to just continue to give him money that he will light on fire with hope that it'll be worth more in the future. So I think that's kind of his genius, which is a type of businessman, don't get me wrong, but I think a lot of times it's framed as he's like this, like this just like amazing, like kind of like a Tim Cook, right? Your Tim Apples. He's that guy's amazing at running logistics.
I was never when I say like this brilliant businessman, I kind of mean it in the in the exploitation of workers kind of way,
right? I mean, and to be fair, that is in our current system, that's part of being hugely successful. Exploiting that.
Yeah, you just exploit your workers, and you just you give them you give them the feeling that they're changing the world through through this corporate vision. I mean, I've never worked somewhere where the corporate vision meant anything at all to my day-to-day work life, but people do it, so that's how it goes. God, there's so many places we could go here. I remembered like so many stories of the door handle thing. Struck me because it was like Musk had this idea that he wanted it to work this way, and then the engineers all had to work overtime to get it to work for a product demo, and then it doesn't even work. And you're right, one of the things that, again, as someone who hasn't been following him obsessively, but I remember reading like a Twitter thread a few years ago when it was just like, Tesla's cars just aren't put together well. This is something you mentioned, and I don't know cars, but they'll say like, look, the trim doesn't work here, these two pieces don't fit together the way they're supposed to. And so these are like supposed to be the cars of the future, the techno car, that has this aura of being like this luxury product. And then the people who actually know cars look at them and go like, this is just garbage.
Right.
Like it's just fun. It's fundamentally, it's got this, I mean, it strikes me that like the two enterprises that are kind of arguably successful, the Solar City concept, like the battery concept, and then the Tesla concept, are both ideas of this is incremental change. Like the actual way that you make a battery is you make one 1% more efficient this year than you made one last year, and you just do that for 40 years, and suddenly you've made up massive efficiency gains. But this is just, again, iterative engineering. This is very, all they really did was just throw a bunch of money behind this project, right? I mean, as I understand, that's kind of how
So I think there's a lot more like actual engineering at Tesla. I think their actual assembly procedures are really bad. I think they've done some interesting stuff with how they conceptualize the battery pack, if you want to give them credit for it. They certainly made, like on a marketing standpoint, they made them cool. And I think the reason they got away with kind of this high price but kind of lower build quality is kind of that halo effect that you saw, this huge wealth in these kind of tech circles, these people that were working for Facebook and all these other startups, like these basically just kids who are computer science degrees and like they're millionaires. And so like this is like baby's first like expensive car, and so a lot of times they don't know better.
Right.
And I mean, to be fair, like the acceleration is insanely fast, and like there are some cool things about Tesla. The vehicles themselves, like I don't want to just like rag on them. I mean, but yes, I mean, from like a when compared to like how well put together a BMW is, it's not even close. But he's certainly exploited, like he's kind of created that new market, or the company has, and so you gotta give him
Yeah, I
credit
mean,
for
I
that.
give him credit for that for sure. And I think that like moving, I mean, electric cars are not the future of environment.
No,
You
no,
know,
they're not. I think
build a
Right.
train, please.
I think
You know,
I think for commuting purposes, like especially like your commuter cars where there is going to be this long transition, I certainly think that there's a place for them, but certainly as like replacing everyone's like one for one mode of transportation. I mean, it's like on a carbon basis, like electric cars are about 50%. Even this is including all your battery construction. I mean, they're about 50% as impactful on a kind of carbon footprint basis, which isn't terrible, but like the big problem, and this is kind of stepping back, is like in America we have these suburbs, and most of our carbon footprint, believe it or not, does not come from our commuting. It comes from all the infrastructure, like your groceries, like how far apart everything is, how much land we all own, how much we heat our houses. And so like if you're just enabling that system just continue as is, you're not going to do anything to save the planet. You're basically just prolonging it. So I think that's kind of the nuanced critique of electric vehicles. I certainly
yeah,
think on the margins they're very, very helpful. They're very helpful in dense cities at reducing cancer and asthma causing ground level ozone pollution. So I mean there's certainly a very good argument for them to exist, but in terms of a replacement, like just replacing every car with a Tesla is not. It's not really a leap forward. It's just kind of a step sideways, I guess.
yeah, no, I mean, for me, it's like mass transit and density are your kind of two,
Right.
like that's what's really going to change the nature of like how we actually pollute as a society. Like if you really wanted to be serious about it, it would you would put a streetcar in every town of more than 50,000 people, and you would encourage densification through
Right.
land use policies. But that's not an engineering problem. All those problems have been solved in terms of the technology, and it's not sexy, right? The way that like Tesla wants to be sexy, the way that oh, this is the future, we have electric cars now, it's like the Jetsons. But no, like really what we need is like mass transit. Anyway,
Right.
sorry, this is my
No, I agree with you, and I think it's actually a really interesting segue into the actual like Twitter purchase, right?
Sure.
So if you want to talk about like, and this is like where he always talks about like, it's so funny because if you watched like his rhetoric, like that he was just like he's like thinking out loud while this whole deal was going on, right? He was forced to buy something that he realized after he made the offer was a mistake, and he wasn't going to get out of it legally, so he ended up having to really convert a lot of his wealth into cash and then turn that cash into a non-liquid private company, which is not great. But he's the way he's approaching it, like he tweeted something along the lines of like, well, I checked and there's 10 managers for every one coder. And it's like, bro, like, okay, so when you're building rockets, like, yeah, 90% of it is like engineering and production. But like when you're running a social network, like how many coders do you need? Like you're going to have them, but like running the social network is, complying with every regulation you have to deal with, like not pissing off your advertisers, like managing all these different like social complex, conflicts. You see them all the time, like who's getting banned, who's getting suspended, who's getting promoted. Like it's a political problem. And he approaches, he's like, well, we have too many managers and not enough coders. It's like, how are you going to code people to like, stop doing like, stop organizing, ethnic genocides on the other end of the world. Like you can't engineer your way out of that. That's a political problem.
They're all these companies are trying to do that. Of course, you get the little content warning. Are you sure you want to post this? You may not want to post this. This seems to be inciting hatred.
Right. But that's the tip of the spear. And it's
right.
like it's a first catch. And like Facebook figured it out. Like I think I saw their back in like 2017. And so this is while Facebook like was pretty big. This was like post Trump, but it wasn't like, their throughput was like in terms of content was nothing like it is today. Like they alone. Right. And so this puts it into concept, like into context, like they had like human moderators and like on their trust and safety team, they had like 5,000 or 6,000 people that were like just dedicated to that task. Right. And so Twitter right now like Musk bought it and had like 7,000 employees. He's already cut the workforce in half, including entire global like branches elsewhere, like the entire like Australian and like all these other countries where these like issues that are very specific to that region, like they've been gutted. And so it's like Facebook, who like obviously is like ruthless and like wanted to like AI and machine learn their way around these problems, realized they'd have a ton of content moderation, and Musk is like, nope, I'm gonna do it differently anyway. And it's like that laissez-faire shit is like not gonna work. And I think I think like the biggest fear like you have from like a standpoint is like he's moving towards like talking about like basically like gatekeeping videos, like almost like an OnlyFans thing. And then it's like, when you cut your content moderation, it's like, how is that not going to be like ground zero for like, Nazi recruiting and like, child sexual assault abuse material. Right. I mean, like that's
Right.
like, yeah, I mean, it's like, I don't know. It's insane to me.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's where because it seems like every day I've been like checking, like my Twitter feed is all just people talking about all the weird shit happening at Twitter right now. And I've been following it a bit, but like the thing that came out like a couple of days ago, and like every day there's a new news story and everything is changing again. So who knows what's going on, but he's floated the idea of just taking the whole platform private, of just like there just won't be a public facing Twitter anymore. It's just all like you just pay to get on there. And that's supposed to solve the problem by just like, and no, who's going to spend $8 a month for like an army of bots? And I can tell you who's, it's going to be every bad actor in the fucking world is going to spend, $8 is nothing. For
Daniel, I don't have a ton of faith a lot of times in the free market, but I feel like if you gatekeep access to the site for $8, like I think the free market will figure out how to make that not happen.
Let me just say, I'm not paying $8 a month for
right, exactly.
For the curated version of Twitter. I mean, and again, what you were saying about there being multiple tiers, I can kind of see like in this, like Elon might just kind of have this idea of like even like the Twitter Blue concept, which has been around prior to Elon, but he seems to be really kind of putting his notions into this of like there's going to be like a better experience for people who pay. Like you have a better algorithm. Like we can't just have the good algorithm like for free. Like,
right.
You've got a good algorithm and a bad algorithm. Okay, if I pay $8 a month, I get the better and half as many ads. Well, somebody did the math on that and is like, well, yeah, if you're paying $8 a month, but then you're losing $6 a month per user in ad revenue, which seems to be how the numbers work out, you're not really making a dent in your problem. You're not solving anything ultimately. I mean, it's just, but it does seem to be like this, again, this like two-tiered system is like, there's going to be the elite who pay for the special Elon Twitter,
pay for more free speech.
Right. And then the rest of us who get the crappy version, like, again, that's that apartheid, kind of thinking.
Right. And it's just so funny because it's like you're watching him in real time, like rediscover, right? So like that kind of goes back to like the whole thing where it's like, Twitter's so funny because like I think it's a great platform. I use it for news. Like I find it much easier to communicate and like I like it. But at the end of the day, like no one uses Twitter except for like it's like really popular among journalists and politicians. And so politicians are like you'll see Trump like at rallies, like, and like most Trump followers, like they like see tweets because they're like screenshotted and put on Facebook or texted from their friends. And so he'll be riffing about his like, gripes about getting like banned or shadow banned on Twitter. You see all these politicians doing it. It's like, no one cares about this, but it's like the reason you're seeing so much, journalistic coverage on is because it's Elon Musk, but also because every journalist uses Twitter. Yeah. Right. So they're all like,
journalists rely on it for their jobs. I mean, I certainly use it,
right.
The growth of our podcast grows along with, our Twitter presence for sure. And, like it's one of those big signs when my account skyrocketed after I was, threatened by neo-Nazis, and suddenly it's like, but maybe you're different. I don't think I know anyone like personally right now. Like I don't have a person that I see on like a more than weekly basis who uses Twitter, except for me. Like, yeah, it's a tiny platform in terms of its actual user base, much smaller than Facebook or even, TikTok is gigantic these days. YouTube is gigantic these days. And, I pay for YouTube Premium because that's a platform, that's an experience that is worth it to me to have the ad-free experience because I'm using it almost all the time for this podcast, et cetera, you know,
giving yourself brainworms.
Yeah. Yeah. That's my job is give myself brainworms. Yes. But no, I wouldn't pay for that same experience on Twitter. I mean, you know, I'm going to find another place to get my news effectively. And then wherever the journalists go is going to be, you know, kind of that thing. I mean, you know, that's really what you're going to see is that wherever the journalists are going to kind of talk to each other, that's going to be the new Twitter. And I don't think that it even exists yet. So I don't know.
Right. And I think like the whole thing is like just, I think the thing that amazes me too about him is like for how much of like a Twitter super user he is. And maybe this is like the whole thing is that he has, you know, 100 million followers. And so his experience is a lot different than everyone's, but it's just like amazing that he like thinks that like it's like he's read. And actually remind me later, because I do have a really good 4chan anecdote that you'll probably like that's Elon Musk related.
Sure.
But there's like, it's like he's been reading all these like right-wing forums and like they all like rage about like blue checks. And so he's like, the problem is like the blue checks. And it's like he's like mainlining like this like crazy like Steve Bannon, Charlie Kirk like talk about like how like Twitter is like, you know, blue check elites. And so he's like, well, people will want to have the like, it's just the whole thing is like he doesn't understand that the reason that like your celebrities, right? So like the people that with millions of followers, the reason they're on Twitter is because there's that verification system is good for people that are doing journalism, for people knowing they can trust a source, but also like their source of revenue. And like, this is Twitter's big breakthrough is like one of the first celebrities that came on like years and years ago was like Shaq, right? Mm-hmm. So Shaq was on there and this was like a huge thing. And there was the whole like Charlie Sheen thing. And so like the verification like allowed these like people that brought eyeballs to Twitter to want to come on. And now Musk is like, well, we're going to charge them and we're also going to make it really easy for people to impersonate you. And it's just like, it seems like there's no good business sense for it, which is really funny because people are laughing at him, I think correctly, but it's almost like that whole like blue check, like the blue checks like came from like these like conspiratorial like right-wing.
Yeah, and I can kind of tell you the big picture on that, at least in terms of like the right-wing space. Like, first of all, I have several I have like a Twitter account that where it's just I just follow Nazis. Like I just follow like all the worst people I find. I just switch over to that account and then follow those accounts. And you would not believe how toxic that feed is. Like it is, you know, the idea that there are no Nazis on Twitter or that there's no right-wing thought on Twitter, believe me, I can show you that feed. The thing that really kind of happened with the blue check thing, I think, comes back to Milo Yiannopoulos was kind of like one of the kind of like bellwethers of that is when, you know, because as you know, and just for the audience, you know, like the blue check was always meant to be like a verification badge. You have verified that you are someone and that you have like some level of, you know, personal notoriety in which like there were rules for it back in the day. You had to have at least two, you know, kind of independent references to, you know, some kind of media. Like you had to be mentioned in the New York Times at least twice, like that, those sorts of criteria so that not just anybody could get it. But the idea was that you were, you know, someone of some kind of notability who might be impersonated. Like that was the whole point of like Twitter verification. And it was just anybody, you know, I know people who were just, you know, they were journalists for a couple of years in between 2012 and 2014, and they just got the blue check and just always had it. Milo Yiannopoulos started being like really super toxic on Twitter to, I think it was, what's her name? Leslie, she was in the Girl Ghostbusters movie, the Paul Feig Ghostbusters.
Oh yeah. Oh my God. Yes, I know who you're talking about. Yes.
Yeah. Anyway, he was absolutely atrocious towards her. In particular, I think was the moment at which like he just lost his blue check. Like he kept kind of getting suspended and then unsuspended and then suspended, and then they just took his blue check away. And that really rubbed people raw just on the, you know, like this is supposed to be just a personal verification badge, but now you're using it as like a mark of good behavior or something. And then that sort of like carries down the list of like, it's all it all just became a meme that suddenly like the blue check verification is like, oh well, you're like the good little children who don't say all the nasty things and are,
Right.
and now it's just a mark of like your neoliberal beliefs or whatever. It's a mark that you're on the left, that you're on the right side, and yeah, but like Tim Pool still has his verification.
Right. And
Richard
Cernovich,
Spencer,
right?
I don't think Richard
Cernovich,
Spencer
like your
has one.
original, Richard Spencer. I know Richard Spencer. Yeah, I'm like your original like Pizzagate guy. Well, it's so funny. So like now you talk about like the geopolitical implications of Musk owning Twitter, right? So like Saudi dissidents have been outed via Twitter, right? So Musk has an intimate relationship with like China, and like it's just so funny because you know that the escalating domino meme, like so it's like
Milo Yiannopoulos is mean to someone on Twitter.
No, they make a all women Ghostbusters movie, and the big domino is that like I don't know national
World War III with China. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, and I think it's just you're right. It is just this meme on the like in that fever swamp, in that right-wing fever swamp, that that the blue check means system approved essentially, and we don't want to be system approved. And the 2016 election, obviously the basket of deplorables thing, and the sort of like it's not like any one thing that created it. It's just this kind of like these right-wing ecosystems just have this like amplifying effect on these kinds of ideas, and it just kind of becomes like accepted wisdom among these people that the blue check that means you're system approved. It means you're one of the good ones. It means you're not one of us, and and Elon has just responded to that, and like we're going to keep official verification now. This is today's thing, is they started seeing accounts like that have official, like an official account. It says the word official on there somewhere, and it has a blue check, but apparently the blue checks are going to go away, and they're just going to mean people who've paid. So you're going to have two. So what is the blue check then? Except like,
I think before we started recording this, Musk tweeted that he was getting rid of it. So it's like he told all these engineers like you have to like work overtime or I'm going to fire you. And then like 2 hours later, people are like told him exactly what would happen that would be a problem. Then he got rid of it. So that's like that's like Musk in a nutshell.
Well, he fires half the workforce, and then like 2 days later, like started getting like phone calls of like, "Hey, do you want to come back?"
Right, right. And so I think the funniest thing is like all this stuff, like where we talk about like things like I have known, like especially like following like the SpaceX is just a complete like financial disaster and always has been. And I think this Twitter thing makes it a lot more difficult for them to raise money, which has all sorts of implications. We should talk about that maybe in a later episode if you're interested. It's really, I think, fascinating. I think it's probably too long for this, but it's just like that it's really funny to see a lot of people like realize like, hey, maybe this guy is actually not the genius he says he is. And so I'm enjoying that.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So
yeah, it's just sort of like the whole process again of kind of like bringing everything, like it seems like every story of a Musk company sort of has the same sort of backstory on, on some kind of big level. And Twitter is just like everybody's paying attention now because all the journalists are on Twitter and seeing it personally. And when you see how the sausage is made, it's like, no, he's always been like this. This isn't new, Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. No, I was just gonna say, like, I mean, yeah, like that's like, I mean, that's it. And I think I guess I'm actually really curious about your take, and I don't want to forget to do this because I think because of the spaces, like, and like I told you, I'm an avid listener to the pod here. I find it really fascinating to see like how these right spaces online have morphed and just like, I really find it just super fascinating to listen to. And one thing I wanted to bring up to you, and I think I sent this to you actually months and months ago, back in May, I think he was kind of flirting with kind of right-wing ideas, especially, some issues around personally having dealt with transgender people in his family and different relationships. And I don't want to get too much into that because I think there's some privacy issues. But I think what's really fascinating to me is people who, he had these kind of, was kind of flirting with these kind of like outwardly right-wing ideas are pointing out. But I tweeted about this back in May, right? So Musk was posting about fertility rates, right? So he's like posting charts about fertility rates, and he doesn't like explicitly say like white replacement, but it's like literally white replacement shit. And it's like people were like, "Oh, you're right." Like he's like talking about like population collapse, and like if you look at like on a macro standpoint, there's there's no, I mean, there's like population collapse is not on anyone's radar. What will decrease is in Europe and the United States, like either absolute or by proportion, percentage of white populations, which is the big concern, which is why Tucker Carlson's talking about it. So Musk is talking about it, and I was tweeting about like, hey, look, this is like straight up like white replacement theory stuff, and like the Musk fans who some of them have really because I kind of caused a little bit of trouble with like SpaceX, like some of their messaging, like some of them have kind of glommed onto me and they're tweeting at me like, that's not it. He's just talking about, having enough humans to populate Mars or whatever. And I found like immediately, like on 4chan, like immediately after this went up, someone posted, and I'll send you the screenshot. Like immediately afterwards, someone's like, does this guy browse poll now or something? And then someone responds, careful, he could be using that talking point to brainwash people into accepting mass illegal immigrations of aliens and N-words. And then they're talking about like, and there's people like having this argument, be like, he's based, and then other people are like, he's part, like it's just, and so it's just like people in these right spaces picked up on it immediately. And we're like, this guy's based now, or like, this is like a psyop, and like, they're doing that whole thing they do. And like normies or whatever on Twitter, who I'm like, hey, this is like barely, this is like, I don't even want to say dog whistle. I mean, like, this is like obvious, like
it's pretty explicit. Yeah,
explicit. And like, people are like, oh no, it's just him being him. And it's like, for me, that part is just so bizarre. And like, you've seen more and more of that stuff. Like it's like, how many times can the guy like accidentally, or like, use Hitler in a meme, either that it's like kind of a joke. And it's like, how many times are you going to post that exact same stuff that is like, if not identical to like stuff you see on like explicitly racist forums, is like just close enough to it or runs in parallel to it, where it's like, this guy's problematic. Like, I don't know how much he's doing it like explicitly versus how much he just has like boomer brain and is just like, totally Facebook Q-pilled like every other like, white 50 something, I don't know.
It's just part of the discourse on those sides now. I mean, you see, and this is something that I've talked about a lot on this podcast, and like, it's a recurring theme, but stuff that like Richard Spencer was saying that was overt Nazi stuff in 2016 is now just in 2022 you have mainstream political candidates talking when just that many words. It's just like you just kind of shave off the overt anti-Semitism, but I mean, this whole like great replacement stuff, the whole anti-democracy ideas, these kind of, this is very normalized on like even the center right these days.
Right,
it is not like, and it's not even like, I think Republican politicians, like they kind of the old school Republican politicians, they want their tax cuts, and they want their money, and they want the industry, and they want the oil industry to do whatever the fuck it wants to do. They're not paying attention to this stuff. But like the new people, like all the new blood, all the young blood, every young Republicans club is just absolutely filled with this stuff. And I mean, look, YouTube is better than it used to be, but you can still find this stuff on YouTube. It is not difficult. I can go and I can find live streams where, I mean, Lauren Southern is sitting and like palling around with Destiny, and that matters for youth culture. And it's been going on long enough that if you're 20 years old today, you've been listening to this since you were like 12. It's just part of the conversation now. And I think it bubbles up through people like Musk. And so when Musk tweets it out like that, it's like, it doesn't matter if he's based or if he's, just a boomer thinking about this. What matters is that it's coming forward through him into more and more people's eyes. It's a sign of how popular this stuff is just within that ecosystem. And when the people beneath him are, being like, saying the quiet part, the slightly quiet part, the one that's like 2 decibels lower quiet part, when they're bringing that back up to volume and actually saying like, no, this is about, the Jewish people and the black people, not to use their words, but it's just right there. It's just right there along with it. And they get thousands of upvotes sometimes. It's just it, and the issue there is not even the the individual size of the accounts, because a lot of these accounts only have a couple of hundred followers or whatever, but there are so many of them, and that there is a bot-like behavior. But these are also just like 18-year-olds, 16-year-olds hanging out on Twitter, and like all retweeting each other. They're hanging out in some other forum, and then they see this, and then you hang out on Telegram, and they see, oh, Elon Musk posted this, and then they all go swarm onto it and make it seem like it's bigger than it is. But it is like a large number of people, like,
Right. And if you look at like, I haven't spent a bunch of time doing it because it's just, I mean, if you look at how many accounts have been like registered in the last like month or two, they're just like, first person they follow is like Elon Musk. I know the
Elon Musk and Kanye West.
right. And there was the you see the video the other day, that incel stalker guy. Did you see that video that went viral?
Oh, I don't think I saw that one.
Jacob something. There was a kid who basically did like a rape and stalking fantasy, and he was like interviewed by police and like filmed himself and then put online. You should definitely follow it. But his like, he like started an account like earlier this year after Musk bought the site, and his like first follow was like Musk.
Yeah.
So it all like, I don't know. It's just like that's the part that concerns me. And I think there's some really, I think the good news is that among the Musk followers, that a lot of people that followed him from early on were, I don't want to say like a lot of people will call them leftists. I don't think they were. They were just kind of like your generic, like kind of like millennial, Gen Xer, like kind of like socially liberal people. And some of them have really gone along for the ride and are just like repeating everything he says, but a lot of them are pushing back. What is concerning though, and I think this is like thing that I've seen, is like I've pointed this out and people are like, oh, isn't he allowed to cut loose? Isn't he allowed to like, talk shit and post shit? And I was like, I posted shit, when I was a teenager. Like, first of all, I'm not a 50-year-old man, but also like I'm sorry, but like one of the downsides of running a public company is like, you can't do that stuff. That's bad governance. Like you cannot, like your board should be stopping you from doing that. And like, I'm sorry, like if that's the downside of being the richest man in the world, like, it's like, sorry, you don't get the same grace for shit posting. Like people are going to, put a higher standard on it. And it's like, people are it's such a bizarre dynamic. I think about
the things that I don't post on Twitter, like that I'm uncomfortable kind of being around. Even I have like 10,000. Actually, I lost like 300 followers in the last month. So I've been right under 10,000 for a really long time. And now I'm at like 9,700. It's fine. I'm not bitter about it at all. It's fine. But yeah, I have nearly 10,000 followers, and I'm like, I know that comes with a certain degree of like scrutiny and a certain degree of responsibility, for this podcast and for just, and I'm like nobody, you know what I mean? And, for Elon Musk to just go out there and like openly try to manipulate the markets and like goose his stock price on Twitter, like, yeah, no, that he should be punished for that. Absolutely. And the stuff that goes out there, I mean, I just think the larger your platform is, the more responsibility you have to use that platform responsibly. And Elon Musk is just the absolute, opposite of that. He just, and his defenders on that sense are just like, what? He can't just be a person. If he wants to be a person that goes out there, then create a dummy account and
right.
Like, yeah, create an alt, create a private alt, or do whatever and post to your buddies all your kind of fun jokes. But like, that's not what he wants to do. He wants to be the life of Twitter, the main character, the eternal main character. We now have him. It's Elon Musk. Elon Musk will be the main character for the rest of time, I guess. But or until he steps down. I kind of think he's going to step down. I don't know. Do you have any predictions about that?
I don't think he can. I don't think he can step down from anything. I think. I think the financial situation, kind of, all of his companies are highly interlinked. He has a lot of personal loans and leverage. I don't think he can step away from anything. I think, like every other great corporate blow up we've seen, like I don't want to call it like an explicitly a Ponzi scheme or anything like that. There's a lot of circular funding. There's a lot of lying that's required to keep it up. My expectation is that, like every other person before him, he has to go bigger and more extreme, more distractions, more risks until it eventually falls apart. I don't think he's mentally capable of stepping down, because that's admitting failure. But I think more fundamentally, I think all of his businesses and all his personal interests and all of his finances are all tied up into just this big incestuous mess, and he can't step down. I don't think he's capable of it.
I was kind of thinking more he would be, more in the background, like less the, like he can't financially walk away from it, but essentially he just like goes, look, I put a team of people in charge. These are and I'm now.
You mean at Twitter specifically?
At Twitter specifically.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I think he possibly could do that, but then it's just like, but the problem is, and like, this is kind of more of a like kind of business wonky, like business management stuff, forever faith you put in it. It's like, if you're like the the funder or whatever, the owner, and you put a CEO in charge, like you have to give them like for example, like with Jeff Bezos, say whatever you will about him, I'll say plenty of bad things about him, right? But when he's running, right, so when he's running, even like his rocket company or the Washington Post, he has a CEO. Like, I'm sure he checks up with them on some basis, but he's not going in and like undermining them at every regular interval. And
Right.
like you just know with Twitter is like when something goes viral, like, hey, this like right wing shithead who like did some bigotry got banned, like enough people are going to go to it, and then he's going to chime in. And I don't think that's I don't think that's conducive for a business environment to thrive. I think the other thing to keep in mind is that he bought a mature business that had been around forever, had its own insular culture. And every other company that he's been involved with has been either very small or been a startup. And he's been able to kind of, keep sycophants and keep these people that are kind of loyal to him. Whereas now he's buying a company with people who have largely are fairly wealthy or like you're pretty upwardly mobile. And he's going in and saying, like, for example, the first thing he did is like, and this is like very like, laugh at me if you want, but like, every company has their own culture, and like there's still like, there's still some sense of camaraderie, even if it's all like kind of intertwined with capitalism. Like Twitter employees called themselves tweeps, which was a Twitter peep, right, put together. And like literally the first day on the job, he's out there tweeting, "We're not tweeps anymore, we're twits." And it's like, for me, it's like it seems so silly, but it's like, you
Right.
don't understand the culture. You haven't bothered to learn it. And all these things are going to alienate people. And so like, there's so many like little, like kind of like MBA, like business failure stuff that you'd see, like what not to do in Harvard Business Review that he's doing. And that's beyond just his, like, it seems like kind of everything. He just doesn't, he's just making up as he goes along. And for how much public visibility Twitter has, it just doesn't seem tenable. And basically I'm just saying he's fucked, and I don't know if he can walk down. I have no idea.
Yeah, sure.
That's what he should do, but I don't think he can. I don't think he's capable of it.
Yeah. Well, I guess on the upside, all the engineers at Tesla and SpaceX are actually getting some work done. So, at least there's that. Look on the bright side.
Yeah, until the layoffs come. So,
yeah, until the layoffs come. When
right.
he has to downsize all those businesses in order to fund his,
right.
debt obligations to Twitter. Like, it will be so hilarious to me if this literally just pulls his entire empire down. Like if it just goes out in a fire sale, because he just has to fund, because otherwise the bone saw guys in Saudi Arabia are going to come for him.
Well, I mean, it's for me, the most stunning part is like, I don't like Tesla is able, like, nominally to generate, cash flow to pay for expenses, and they book a profit. Like there's some weird stuff with their accounting, but I don't think it's anything like, super insane. But SpaceX is doing these huge R&D expansion projects. Their satellite internet project, their super rocket they have to do for kind of these NASA moon projects, and they burn billions in cash every year. And this company does not make money at all. And so they have to go to the VC market at a higher valuation every single year and extract, billions and billions of dollars. And all these co-investors, these co-equity investors that signed on with them in Twitter, they've already taken like a 50% haircut on their valuation. These bonds that the banks promised in order to back the deal, the top line value, or the nominal value, was like $13 billion. Like, if those banks tried to place those bonds today, especially in the current interest rate environment and what Musk has done already, like, you're talking about like a $6 billion loss. And so really, I think the one to pay attention to is when SpaceX needs more money. Is he going to be able, right? Because he can't go to the Saudis for that money. You can't fund your national security intensive, like, U.S. rocket company with Saudi and Chinese funds.
Right.
So when he has to raise that money, is he going to be able to? Because he's burned a lot of people. History has said he's able to always pull a rabbit out of the hat. But kind of the macro environment for those funds doesn't look so hot. So it'll be really interesting. I think SpaceX is the one that's kind of been ignored, but that people will have to pay attention to when they need more money.
And we will. I think this has been fun. I would definitely want to bring you back, and we can get into some of these more granular issues. So hopefully people enjoyed this. You have anything else to add before we wrap up here?
No, thanks for having me on. You can follow me on Twitter at ESG Hound, and I've got a Substack, whatever. I don't publish that much, but yeah, always happy to talk about a topic I know way more than I should about. So thank you for having me on.
Oh no, it's been great, and I will definitely put a link to that Substack and any other links you want to give me down below for sure. So
all right, thanks.
All right, thanks a lot.
That was I Don't Speak German. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the show or found it useful, please spread the word. If you want to contact me, I'm @_Jack_Graham_. Daniel is @Daniel E. Harper, and the show's Twitter is @IDSGpod. If you want to help us make the show and stay 100% editorially independent, we both have Patreons. I Don't Speak German is hosted at idon'tspeakgerman.libsyn.com, and we're also on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Spotify, Stitcher, and we show up in all podcast apps. This show is associated with Eruditorum Press, where you can find more details about it. The music was by Loon the Band.